Welcome into Parasport Nation. Coming up on today's show, the Canadian Paralympic Committee recently announced the addition of the Climbing Escalade Canada as an official member. Christiane Marceau has more on that exciting news, and 10 sport organizations across Canada have been awarded grants through the 2024-25 Paralympic Sport Development Fund. Just how important is that to these sports? Nathan and I will discuss. This is Parasport Nation. Let's get things going.
Welcome to Parasport Nation with Alex Smyth and Nathan Clement.
Hello and welcome in. I am Alex Smyth, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, partner in crime, Paralympian Nathan Clement. Nathan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Alex. How are you doing today?
Yeah, can't complain. It's another busy week in the world of parasport. A lot happening on that national level, both from the large kind of national programs, the NSOs, to the grassroots funding. So there's a lot to dive into. But before we get into any of that, Nathan, you kick things off with the PSN update.
Now, the PSN update.
Hockey took center stage this past weekend as Canada's sporting stars of the present and future took to the field of play. In Mississauga, the Iceland Arena welcomed two major para-hockey tournaments as Canadian Blind Hockey hosted the Eastern Regional Blind Hockey Tournament, and the Cruiser Cup featured over 40 teams from across North America in para-ice hockey. Marking its 11th anniversary, the largest Eastern Regional Blind Hockey Tournament to date showcased a marquee three-game series between Team Yellow and Team Black. The triple header saw Team Yellow defeat Team Black 9-4, 7-2, and 6-4 to sweep the best-of-3 series. In the Cruiser Cup Para-Ice Hockey A Division, in the Cruiser Cup's Para-Ice Hockey A Division, 4 teams played in a round-robin format. After 3 games, the Pittsburgh Mighty Penguins and the Canadiens Montreal faced off in the gold medal game. In the final, the Canadiens Montreal claimed the championship with a 2-0 victory, marking the 3rd consecutive season a Montreal-based team has won the Cup. From the rink to the court, the Canadian wheelchair rugby team has announced that Pat Cote will step down as national team head coach. Cote has been with the program since 2008, wearing multiple hats as team manager, technical programs manager, and in 2016 was named head coach, where he coached Canada in Tokyo 2020 and Paris 2024. During Cote's tenure, the rugby team earned 2 silver medals at the Para-Pan Am Games and a silver at the 2023 International Wheelchair Rugby Cup. And that's our PSN update.
Yeah, speaking of Pat Cote, that's huge news, especially in the world of wheelchair rugby. He's been a stalwart on that team as the coach, as you kind of mentioned there, having many different roles for many years with that program. When there is a coaching change, when you do have kind of key members leaving the team or leaving a program, as an athlete, what kind of impact do you think that can have?
It has a huge impact, as you've had you've had a philosophy under one guy or a group of athletes or a group of people for a while. And when you have someone like Pat Cote, who's had such a huge impact on the wheelchair rugby scene and really helped the development of the sport too, that is major. And I feel like with that team, for example, they have the wheelchair rugby team, they have a great leadership core. And I feel like with teams like that, they're going to be able to really honor all the work that Pat's done with them, but also build for the future with a new direction, a new coach, and a new system. But it really does play a huge factor depending on your team, the bases you have already with that culture and that setup you have in leadership.
Yeah, and I wonder too if this is just going to be kind of the first major move in transition for that program overall, because there's a lot of kind of very experienced veterans on that team, people who have been to 4, 5, 6 Paralympics at this point. I wonder if Pat moving on, maybe do you see some of these other players move on? There maybe a change in that philosophy, a change in the approach, trying to get more younger players to come up and be key cogs in that national team. Time will tell, but it's certainly major news in that sport. But other news too that is kind of capturing headlines. This is more on the grassroots side of things and more on the development side of things, but 10 sport organizations have been given grants through the 2024-2025 Paralympic Sport Development Fund. These funds are ranging from $5,000 up to $15,000, allowing them to institute programming and kind of just execute different projects they have on the go. When it comes to grassroots development to really create that pipeline for high performance sport, Nathan, like funding is everything, absolutely, but it really has to start at the top where you have someone like the CPC or the Paralympic Sport Development Fund that's really making sure those introductory levels are really strong and building that foundation for high performance success down the road.
Exactly. You have to have a base, and it comes from the top all the way down, where right now we're the current athletes, the Paris 2024, but soon we're going to be going into LA in 2028, Brisbane 2032, and games beyond that. And you really need to have that grassroots, that funding, but also the experience that a lot of CPC members bring and a lot of other national sport organizations leaders bring in to programs like we just mentioned it, Pat Cote and what he did with wheelchair rugby, really having that kind of grassroots development. Because you saw in Paris, you have the veterans of teams, but you also have new athletes coming in, the Rios, the other kind of people who are really going to make the difference in the years to come. But at one point, they were doing development camps, they were doing training programs, just trying to learn the sport as kids or even young adults. And it's really important just to have that base work. So that kind of funding is going to be paramount in the years, in the decades leading into future games, but also just future opportunities for para athletes, because that funding goes to camps, it goes to coaches, but it also goes to equipment, which is a huge factor in para sport. It's just the cost of everything. And when you can get equipment for young kids, there's more of an incentive there for them to play, for them to try, and their parents want them to be a part of it. They want to be on those teams, or just those community aspects can really help grow bases and really make Canadian parasport so much stronger.
Yeah, and what I also like too about this funding is that they're not just sticking to like the hubs of Vancouver, Toronto. They're getting into these different regions. Saskatchewan has a program getting funding. Alberta Sport and Recreation Association for the Blind. I'm going to be out there this weekend covering with them the Sight Night in Calgary. They're getting funding for some of their programming. I was recently out in Halifax for the Goalball Open. Well, Blind Sports Nova Scotia is getting some funding there as well to help kind of develop their programs. Even in Newfoundland and Labrador, they have funding as well to kind of initiate their programming. So I think that is also a very key part, that it's not just centralized on these couple hubs, but is spread throughout the country. And speaking of the CPC, they have also been busy, because other major headlines that have been coming through is the fact that they recently announced the inclusion of Climbing Escalade Canada as an official member. So this is marking a huge momentum and push forward for paraclimbing within Canada. I had a chance to talk with the CEC's executive director, Christiane Marceau, to kind of dig in and about how much of an impact this move is going to have. Let's take a listen. Christiane, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
My pleasure.
So first off, congratulations on the big news of Climbing Escalade Canada being brought into the fold with the CPC. What's been going through your mind since the news broke about that new partnership?
Well, I mean, it's been a long time coming for our para athletes, and I'm just very proud and happy for them to have this opportunity to be recognized as athletes and eventually Olympians in the next 4 years. They deserve the world. They deserve this accomplishment. They deserve to be recognized.
And so, what does this move overall do for the organization and for moving the sport of climbing forward, not only on the kind of the Olympic and kind of able-bodied side, but then also the para side as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's recognition. It's official recognition that we are a legitimate sport. We've been on the Olympics program since Tokyo in 2020. Our athletes are deserving of this recognition. They are training so hard. They're dedicated to their sport. They're really strong individual. And the para climbing was just a long time coming to see these athletes be considered at the same level as the able-bodied athletes, having that recognition, that understanding that the Olympic and the Paralympic movement recognize climbing as being one of the sports of the future. All of that makes it more legitimate.
And so for someone who doesn't know, could you maybe describe paraclimbing for someone who may be hearing about it for the first time?
Well, yeah. So in climbing, in sports climbing, there are three disciplines. You have the speed, the bouldering, and the lead climbing. Paraclimbing is a fourth separate discipline. It's a top rope discipline. So basically, if you know a little bit about lead climbing, which is on a 15 to 20 meter wall, climber that gets the highest win, that's basically the same for paraclimbing. The only distinction is that in lead climbing, the climber will attach the rope to anchors as they move up on the wall, while the paraclimbers, the rope is attached to an anchor at the top of the wall, so they don't have to manage the rope as they go up. But everything else remained the same. They have a 15 meters to 20 meter wall at different incline with different routes, so different holds, creating a different pattern on the wall. And it is basically the athletes that get the highest, the fastest, that wins.
And so for the sport itself, who are some of the kind of the major kind of athletes that Canadians should be made aware of, some homegrown talent that may be kind of becoming more familiar as the awareness of the sport grows?
I'm not sure if I'm willing to throw out names because all of our athletes are amazing and upcoming. But we do have about 12 Canadian athletes that have been present on the international stage in the last 2-3 years, committed paraclimbers. I'll throw in some names just because you're asking me to do so. But I would keep my eyes open for Chaz Misuraka is a blind climber, has won many medals, has done very well on the international stage. I'll talk about Seamus as well, Seamus Bullion, who is a upper amputee athlete. Oh my God, I could name Miranda, I could name Emily, I could name Terry, I can name many of them. Our team is really strong, dedicated, passionate individuals, and they all deserve the best in their quest to the Olympic qualification for Los Angeles.
And so for these athletes, like, what does the move mean for them? Have you been able to chat with some of them since the news kind of was announced, and how are they feeling about it?
Well, it's having that. I think the big announcement for them was the inclusion in the para game, rather than the Canadian Paralympic announcement, which is kind of a given. It goes together, right? But the inclusion in the Paralympic game for them means a new goal. It means a new height. We were somehow limited for athletes in paraclimbing to World Championship and World Cup. And, those were the top levels that you could reach, and it created that ceiling of performance. This is what I can do. And some of them have reached those levels already and have performed as those levels. So now what's next, right? So there was that end to their pathway until the announcement of the Paralympic, when now it creates a brand new ceiling where, oh my God, okay, this is a new adventure that I can take on in 4 years. If I train now and I train hard, I might qualify for the Paralympic Games, which in itself it would be an incredible achievement. So it creates a source of inspiration on a daily training. Some of them I know have experienced a renewed interest in the gym and going to train harder. Some of them reach out to some coaches saying, okay, now I need to take this a little more serious, even that what I used to do, because now I need a coach and I need a plan and I need to get myself in a better place if I want to qualify. So it creates more motivation and inspiration.
Yeah, and you mentioned when you were talking about some of the different athletes, it's a different disability classification. So what are the different disability classifications within the paraclimbing sport itself?
So in this parasport, the paraclimbing, we have 9 different classes. of the various disability, ranging from the blind climbers. There are 3 classes for blind climbers. These individuals will climb with what we call a collar on the ground, somebody with a headset telling them where to go, okay, your right hand, left hand, what to do. Then you would have your upper amputees, your lower amputees. So that will be completely a different game. If you have somebody missing a limb that's on the right side versus the left side, then that creates a different challenge on the climbing route that needs to be balanced for each side of the body. And then you have what we call range of power, which are limb deficiency rather than amputees. So all of that, 9 different class. We still don't know yet how many of those will be included in the Paralympic Games. We've heard rumor maybe up to 4, maybe 5 of those classes there. So there's going to be some merging of the class. But as of now, we have 9.
And so, as you mentioned, and this is kind of a natural progression for any sport, especially if they're being introduced into the Paralympics for the first time. Maybe the field of competition is a bit smaller as that sport gets introduced, and then there's opportunities to grow. On the global stage, how big and how prominent is paraclimbing internationally, and how much of a competitive field is there to the sport?
I can say it's growing. You're correct that it is smaller right now, but it has been growing in the last 4 years exponentially. There are about 26, 27 nations right now that send paraclimbers to World Cup and World Championships, so a decent number of participation worldwide. As for the field itself, Canada, we are right now about in the middle of the group in terms of performance. We have some really strong performance, some lower in the ranking performance, and that puts us about in the middle of those 27 nations. So thinking about the Olympics, we're going to see, while USA is going to take a bunch of the Pan America's quotas, then you're going to see a lot of athletes coming from Europe, some from Japan and Asia. And then I'm very confident that we're going to take some of those spots, Canadian, in the LA game for sure.
And I mean, the excitement still continues because it seems like there's multiple different announcements taking place. Obviously, another major one has to do with the CEC just announcing that they're going to be you're going to be hosting the first ever para climbing national championships, February 8th and 9th in 2025. Tell us a bit about that. What can people expect from that? Why was it important to establish this national paraclimbing championship too?
So that goes into an overall effort to switch from our philosophy when it comes to paraclimbing has always been participation. We wanted to increase participation and give as much opportunity as possible. But with the announcement of the CPC and the Paralympic game, we got to switch a little bit our focus to our performance. Right, there needs to be a little bit more of a selection process done in order to put the best team forward, but also while keeping that development piece to grow the paraclimbing sport. So national comes as a logical next step into creating that pathway to A, select the team, but also B, give more opportunities to develop some grassroots and Canadian climbers, so that we're not just talking about LA, but we're talking about Brisbane, and we're talking about the next Paralympic. So we need to start bringing that community to our national level, have a little bit of a celebration. This year's going to be big about celebrating the achievement that we've done in paraclimbing the last 4 years, answer questions, creating town halls, and opportunity for participants to understand what does that mean to be on the CPC family in the Paralympic Games, and also obviously an opportunity to collect points and select our national athletes that will compete in 25.
And so on the grassroots side of things, how is that kind of community growing in Canada, going in terms of kind of developing those grassroots paraclimbing programs? Are there certain hotbeds or regions that really kind of take center stage with this, or is there interest and development happening across the country?
There are a few grassroots organizations that are helping develop paraclimbers. I'm thinking about Grimpe in the province of Quebec that are doing a lot of workshop and initiation opportunities for people to try. There has been the Adaptive Climbing Society in BC and Toronto that have done also a lot of workshop. They've helped climbing gym understanding the challenge of accessibility. So that is also a big challenge for developing the grassroots. Climbing gyms themselves need to be more accessible. Think about the stairs, things about your mat. When you get into the mat to get toward the wall, that ledge needs to be addressed and made more accessible for those athletes or those participants to be able to experience the sport. So there's been a lot of effort at the grassroots level. More needs to be done. Absolutely more needs to be done. There's still a lot of challenges, a lot of barrier to participation. Our athletes are the national team of ambassadors. I know, again, I named Seamus earlier, but Seamus runs a Climb Like a Paraclimber nights for people to understand what it means to be a paraclimber. So a little bit more that joint activity between the existing climbing community and the para participants. How can we put them together to experience that community feel and love of the sport?
Yeah, and I think that's just a natural kind of pathway that any para sport that's growing has to take. I actually have the personal experience on a previous show for AMI. I was at one of those Toronto events trying out paraclimbing myself. Struggled. I definitely struggled. I don't have the technique down, but it was great just seeing that wealth of kind of anticipation and excitement to try climbing in an accessible way. Are there other para sports or success stories that you look at as, this could be a blueprint that paraclimbing could take to really establish itself and build long-term success both within Canada, but then also on the international stage?
Well, I think the strength of climbing in general are very unique. Climbing is a unique sport in the sense that you're not playing against an opponent. You're not trying to beat someone else. You're trying to beat yourself. You're competing against the wall. You're competing against an object. And that object is your challenge of the day. How can I beat this thing in front of me by myself? So there is such a different community and value to this sport that I haven't seen in any other sport. And the paraclimbers bring in that resiliency, that motivation, and that perseverance to that existing community. It just creates an explosive mix that can inspire anyone to take on an activity. Like this is everybody's welcome to climbing gym because everybody's know that they're not competing against someone else. It's only for themselves. And everybody support each other, which we see a lot in para sports in general. There is that community feeling so strong. But when you put that with the existing community in climbing, you got a match made in heaven.
And Christiane, I also want to know about your personal journey and connection to the sport and where your relationship goes back with Climbing Escalade Canada and the growth of climbing domestically. We've talked about the sport itself, but what about you? Like, what's your journey been like with the sport?
Well, I've been with Climbing Canada for 5 years now. Not a climber myself, which is interesting. I am a sports manager person. I manage sport, and that's what I do. But I did discover through my journey with climbing the values of this sport that I haven't seen anywhere else. I've been with many other sports before, and this sport is unique in as I just mentioned, in its approach to the competitive side while still being a sense of camaraderie with the other climbers, even though you're competing for the same first place and the same medal, but you're not technically competing against them, right? The values of community support. I mean, other sports, of course, have that. I'm not saying we're completely unique, but there is a level of it in climbing that is very pure and it's very inspiring to see.
And so, lastly, where can folks go to check out some more information if they want to find out information about the upcoming national championships? Where should they go to find out more?
Well, that's a good time because I'm going to be opening registration this week for the Para Climbing National Championship. I do recommend our Instagram account, which is Climb Canada or Para Climb Canada, as well as our website, Climb Canada, climbingcanada.ca. Those are the two places you're going to find the most up-to-date information. We also have a newsletter on our website that you're welcome to sign up for to receive the information directly in your inbox.
That was fantastic. Christiane, thank you so much, and have yourself a wonderful day.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for having me.
That was Christiane Marceau, who is the Executive Director of Climbing Escalade Canada. Nathan, any final thoughts after hearing her speak about the news that they are being brought in as part of the CPC?
I think it's absolutely incredible news, and you and I probably agree, and you and I probably have the same climbing abilities. Probably not as good as a lot of these guys, but I've had the privilege of getting to know Seamus, getting to know Chaz, getting to know Emily, and even I attended one of Seamus's learn to paraclimb adaptive climbing nights and days, and it's really cool just seeing the grassroots of this sport. I have a feeling, and I'd love your thoughts. I think paraclimbing could be one of the biggest parasports in the next decade or so. I think it's just got game status. These athletes are getting carding now because now they're under the Canadian Paralympic Committee, so they're going to be getting some funding, and it's really going to start growing and exploding. Like, there's major events in Innsbruck that happen every year, major events that happen in Salt Lake City, and we are just on the start of a crazy boom in the world of paraclimbing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly going to be a sport we're going to be following very closely here on the show. But speaking of which, that's all the time we have for Nathan Clement. I'm Alex Smyth. Thank you for watching and listening. Until next time, take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Parasport Nation. Like and subscribe to the channel to follow us now.